Well, when somebody walks into the floor to buy a bike, now whether he is a casual biker, a professional biker, or an amateur biker, is something that the store associate needs to gauge. 5 years ago, was considered to be a sweet spot, delight, and excitement. Has become now a norm in the business. When a 2 day delivery or a 1 day delivery, or maybe a same day delivery used to excite a customer, today a 2 hour delivery has become a norm. Very early in my career at Reliance Retail, I had a CEO, Sriram Srinivasan, and he used to make it a mandate for us that if you don't spend 100 hours on a floor, you don't have a right to open your mouth in the weekly meeting.
Kartik Bhatt has been a marketer for 22 plus years across various industries and geographies.
These choices coming from the insights that you learn from anthropology by being on the floor. And these insights come only when you spend sufficient number of time.
Imagine an anthropologist who talks about marketing psychology and consumer psychology when talking about retention.
What is the purposiveness of shopping? Why do people choose a brand over the other brands? What enables them to trust a retailer? What drives or what leaves a sweet spot in their mind to return to a retailer?
In some sense, this whole mandate to go omnichannel has become a very, very pronounced phenomenon after COVID. How did you navigate that change?
This was born out of compulsion during COVID. It's no longer omnichannel is about online and the store. It is about online and the customer's premises.
AI has been a buzzword. Is there something you're experimenting with right now which is meaningful and it seems like a good promise?
So, again, this is borderline confidential, but I'll try and see how much can I help you.
Sure.
The reason why a customer has to come to me has to be
Hi and welcome to one more episode of the State of Tradition Marketing Podcast. This is your host Ankur Gattani. I am very excited about this conversation with Kartik Bhatt today. He's got 25 years and more of experience as a marketer. And the most interesting part about this, he started off as an anthropologist. Now imagine somebody like that talking about marketing psychology, consumer psychology, and how it leads into great consumer experiences.
Thanks for doing this, Kartik. Super excited to be having this conversation.
It's an absolute pleasure to be hosted on a fantastic forum which necessarily talks about probably one of the most important elements in business today, state of retention marketing, especially in an era where acquisition costs have spiraled and everybody's trying to vie for the same consumer. I think some initiative of this nature definitely helps us to get closer to the consumer and understand and learn and maybe disseminate more knowledge about how do we get it right the first time rather than continuing to experiment with it. Thank you.
Awesome. So Kartik, just for starters, you've had a fairly long career in marketing. I'm sure there were some interesting choices you made along the way. Would love to understand how did you end up where you did and key milestones that you'd like to flag from that point.
It's just a coincidence that I've had a career in marketing. Believe you me, I wasn't born a marketer. I did not study marketing. I am an MBA in retail and a PhD in retail anthropology, which is the science of shopping. Marketing happened to be the first choice or the first interesting consumer-facing option that I had. And then I continued to build on it because this consumer-facing space, the space of how people behave, why people behave, and what do they do when they behave in a particular manner, when they engage with retailers, when they engage with shops, when they engage with products, is what intrigued me. And that's where I kept building on to my journeys from Reliance Retail to my own business, Fashionara in India, then moving on to Flamingo, then moving on to Dr. Batra's, working with Sharaf Retail, and now with Faisalia Group. It's always been in the consumer-facing space where I primarily interact and understand why people shop with me, how people shop with me, and how can I make them shop with me more and more time and again. And how do I enhance that experience? What do I do to make sure that they continue to be with me rather than going to my competitors? So that's what continues to intrigue me over the last maybe 2.5 decades. And yeah, that's the space I am in. So it isn't a choice. It happened accidentally and then I started enjoying it and now I'm thoroughly into it.
So you spoke about anthropology as an academic subject, and I'm now curious if that theoretical understanding of that whole framework of thinking, how does it help you as a marketer? Because this is all about, like you said, a lot about how consumers behave. Help us a little bit about what you're able to apply and how have you evolved that thinking over these years?
It's elementary. When you look at, let's say, if you were to go into the science of shopping, retail anthropology, and if I were to define my store, I would have, in a very conventional manner, I would have stuffed my store with merchandise. I would have placed signages everywhere in the store. I would have placed fixtures in a very ad hoc, haphazard manner. But when I look at the science of shopping, And when I understand that what is the direction that the consumer moves when he enters the store, what are the hotspots that he look at, what is the time that he has between two interactions, how many product does he touch and feel, what is his line of sight, what are the senses that are activated, is it the fragrance first, is it the light first, is it the color first, or is it the temperature first, what is the minimum time that he wants to be left alone before intercepted so that I don't rush my staff onto him? Does he want to
Sure.
be coached? Does he want to be guided? Do I need to sell him or should I help him buy? Now, these choices coming from the insights that you learn from anthropology by being on the floor. And these insights come only when you spend sufficient number of time. I remember very early in my career at Reliance Retail, I had a CEO, Sriram Srinivasan, and he used to
Right.
make it a mandate for us that if you don't spend 100 hours on a floor, you don't have a right to open your mouth in the weekly meeting. So the journey that started, and I started my journey from a shop floor as a bagging guy standing behind the cashier. So most of the time
Okay.
that I stood on the floor was standing behind a cashier, picking up the products that a cashier would bill, putting into the bag. Then I got promoted into a cashier. Then I was asked that why don't you go and put clothes on the mannequin? After putting clothes on the mannequin, it was why don't you make sure that in the night the store is kept ready the next day in terms of being refurbished and reinventorized and kept ready in terms of recovery being done. So during all those phases, I realized how people shop. The joy of discovery that a woman has when she enters the store, the wheeling nature that she has when she needs to touch 12 to 15 garments before she even picks up one for a trial, while the purposive nature of shopping that a man has. And I've seen that manifested. I know that my arrow shirt at Shoppers Stop lies on the left third box on the second aisle. I would go straight there. But if you let my wife go into the store and shop, she would go around touching every item before she lands up at a product which she might have intended to buy or she wouldn't have, for all I know. But all this and the entire science of consumer behavior comes alive when you stand on a shop floor, and that is something that enables you to engage or gauge the relationship between the customer and the product category, gain the time spent on the floor, gain the triggers, inhibitors, and enforcers that help a customer make a right buying decision. And that is where you intercept his journey obtrusively or unobtrusively and create a differentiation for yourself. So that's how anthropology builds into consumer marketing and science of shopping.
Very fascinating. So this means since you've also moved across categories, every time you enter a new category or perhaps even a brand, you would spend the first few, let's say, weeks spending a substantial amount of time on that subject, just being on the shop floor.
100%. So I started my journey with fashion. Then I moved into retail banking, which is a slightly different category. I again came back into fashion. Then I was into the hypermarket space. Then I was into the duty free, which is liquor, tobacco, confectionery,
Sure.
fragrances, book stationery. Then I was into health sciences and healthcare products. Then again, fashion, book stationery, lifestyle, and adventure products at Sharaf Group. And now I'm in the electronics product. What changes is the way people behave, but what doesn't change is the psychology behind it. What is the purposiveness of shopping? Why do people choose a brand over the other brands? What are the various codes that they look at during the shopping journey? What enables them to trust a retailer? What enables them to make a consideration into a discovery, into a purchase decision on the spot? What drives or what leaves a sweet spot in their mind to return to a retailer more or less remains the same, whether it's electronic retail or whether it's fashion retail. The only difference would be the way consumers behave, but why they behave in a particular manner more or less is guided by the same insights. It's the price,
Very
people,
interesting.
promotion, product, technology, experience that drives this behavior.
I'm now curious with all the work that's happening in the digital ecosystem on one side and how data is expected to be used in very powerful ways to make some of these decisions around consumer experience. How do you relate the world of on ground, first hand, anecdotal, observational insights with the world of data driven analytics and predictive models and everything that you can do sitting in front of a computer? How do these two worlds interact with each other?
I consider myself to be blessed to be a part of a generation that has had the best of both. As a young retailer and as a PhD student working with Paco Underhill, helped me go down onto the floor, stand outside the store with a notepad and make observations on a 20-25 page checklist to write down observations. And the same observations came true on an analytical dashboard through heat mapping or through an online evaluation. But what both of them give an insight is why people are not doing certain things. For example, one of the categories that I today deal with, when I stand on my shop floor, it takes me 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to gauge that insight and then convert into an actionable insight. But when I
Mm-hmm.
observe that over 100,000 interactions on my web platform, it gives me an immediate answer about what am I doing wrong. Whether it's my picture on the store or whether it's the product page on my website, whether it's my promotional banner at the entrance of the store or whether it's my homepage banner on my website, whether it's my leaflet that drives the consumer to the store or whether it's my click ad or my social media ad that drives the consumer to my website, the insights behind it are more or less the same. The manifestation of those insights are different. And hence, if I'm able to club both of them together, leveraging my strength of my stores on the ground and layering it with my online insights and online analytics, I would be able to move from what we call as a reactive engagement or reactive improvisation into a far more proactive engagement where I'll be able to save time, able to improve my return on ad spend, my dollar spends returns, and more importantly, I would be able to hold on to my customer before he finds a reason to leave me and go to somebody else. So the churn, switch, and transition is something that I can hold on to much faster if I'm able to leverage both of them. What 5 years ago was considered to be a sweet spot, delight, and excitement has become now a norm in the business. When a 2 day delivery or a 1 day delivery, or maybe a same day delivery used to excite a customer, today a 2 hour delivery has become a norm. If my Insta Minute doesn't deliver the milk in 15 minutes, I find a reason. I look for a reason to go to his remarks page and give a poor review. It's the choices that have spoiled me, and hence businesses need to stay that much more agile to get insights into what happens, and that it has to be that fast. Today's consumer doesn't shop at a store once in 2 months, once in 3 months. He goes to a platform of his choice once in every 2 to 3 days. And that's the behavior that I see when I switch between Noon and Kareem, Noon and Amazon, Amazon and First Cry, Amazon and Mom's World for the same product category. It's purely the experience. How a shop floor in Shoppers Stop in Andheri used to make me happy. The layout on Noon today makes me happy. The user journey on Noon makes me that much more happy. And I know where to go and click without trying to fidget. I can do the same purchase of buying a milk in 6 seconds that I would have taken 20-25 seconds on a Kareem or an Insta shop. So it's about ease. And that ease only comes from insights, data, and anecdotal or empirical learning.
You know what's interesting is you speak about agility for businesses. At the same time, as a marketer, I've not come across too many legacy marketers who've come from a very traditional offline first background speak with the level of savviness that you do about digital ecosystems. So I'm curious, what was that transition in marketing like? How did you navigate the whole offline first, physical first ecosystem to a transition towards digital? Were there step changes somewhere in the journey? Were there choices that you made which always make sure you're staying on top of this change that's happening?
You don't stay aligned to the fundamentals of marketing. You stay aligned to the consumer. You need to go
Mhm.
where your consumer goes. You need to chase and stay, maybe learn to stay one step ahead of the consumer. And as a consumer myself, if I have changed my ways of being, I have changed my ways of engagement, it would be unworthy of me to expect my shoppers to remain where they were 20 years ago. So if my shoppers have changed, I have to change as well. The fundamentals of marketing, whether online or offline, continue to remain the same. It's the acquisition, retention, growth, the
Of course.
awareness versus the conversions. Whether you look at it as an offline or an online, the only difference that you get is that online gives you a very clear return on ad spend, which an offline has never been able to give you. You'd never know what part of the money spent has given you the business, whether it's the traffic that came through a leaflet
Of course.
or a traffic that came through an activation in the mall. You would spend a lot of time to do vouchers, but the online business gives you a quick answer. But contrary to the belief that online marketing is all about technology and about knowing how to get your AdWords campaign right, the fundamentals still remain the same. Your communication has to be that much more crisp, sharp, precise,
Mm.
because you are dealing in a far more over communicated space. Instagram, when Emirates NBD sends me four communications in a week, it competes with almost 2 hours of my Instagram usage on a daily basis. So they need to be that much more agile, that much more fast, that much more crisp. It's like being on the second page or the left hand side bottom page of a Times of India, where you need to
Right.
fight with so many other retailers for the ad space. So the concept more or less remains the same. It's the manifestation has changed. Learning was, I would say, a little difficult in terms of transitioning, but once you start moving into that space and once you understand how consumer behaves there, then it becomes a journey of its own. It took me a couple of years to get there, but now I think I'm able to meander seamlessly between both. And maybe to some extent, I have lost touch with the conventional BTL/ATL marketing, and I spend a
Mhm.
lot more time on the digital space. And even in the digital space, I I'm a firm believer that awareness and upper funnel is something that I would necessarily leave to the brand marketing side of the business. But in the e-commerce side
Sure.
of the business that I currently run for multiple
Hmm.
units, I think it's the conversion space, lower funnel, mid lower funnel, and the retention space where I need to make
Hmm.
sure that once I've spent that money continues to come back to me. And my idea is how can I make this customer positive? Obviously, the customer is not going to be positive for me in the first, second, third instance.
Sure.
So I
Hmm.
patiently wait that is it his fourth transaction, is it his fifth transaction, or is it the seventh transaction that where I make him positive? So the
Right.
idea of bringing traffic onto the site, hunting for audience sets is a completely different game plan, and we've already moved a
Hmm.
long way into holding him back and growing him from where he is. So the journey has changed significantly.
Very interesting. So, from a lens of how markets have changed, how consumer has changed, there's a fair bit of evolution. But if you look at just the nature of media fragmentation, you spoke about the 2 hours on Instagram and the amount of noise somebody has to go through. Is it to say that the way brands were built 20 years ago is not the same way as brands will be built today? A next big, huge brand is, way, way harder compared to what it was 20 years ago.
Definitely. Uh, Customers in the past used to go for Super Bowl advertising. Customers in the past used to watch cinema. Customers in the past used to watch TV programs for 2 hours, 3 hours a day. So the brands were built on the conventional media. People used to read a Times of India or a Dubai or a Khalij Times and a Gulf Times 2 hours a day. Today's consumer spends a lot more time on community engagement with his peers and friends. He spends a lot more time on social media. He spends a lot more time on certain apps or gaming platforms or engagement platforms. So the brands are built through this route. The brand is not built purely through the communication route, but it is built through an experience route. Today's customer doesn't believe in seeing is believing. He is moved to experiencing is believing. So I cannot continue to communicate to a customer and say that I am the best in the business. I am here. I'm going to do this for you. His trust on me is going to be built when he starts experiencing my brand in a particular manner. So if I'm deeper into community, if I'm deeper into rewarding, if I'm deeper into engagement, if I'm deeper into delivering the experiences that I've promised or committed, and am I able to improvise? And more importantly, what is in it for the customer to deal with me? What does he get every time he engages with me in terms of rewards, in terms of enrichment, in terms of association, partnership, value adds, etc. So brands today are not built purely on communications and on promises or tone of voices or beliefs. Obviously they continue to be a part of it, but today's brands are built on engagement, on experiences, and on long lasting relationships.
Fair enough. So, in some sense, this whole mandate to go omni-channel has become a very, very pronounced phenomenon after COVID, for sure. That accelerated the journey. In your case, in terms of the first, let's say, step change you started to see in the world of retail and consumer experiences to start looking at digital a lot more seriously. When was that? What was that setup? And how did you navigate that change?
This is interesting. And this was born out of compulsion during COVID. 2019, 2020, we were in the middle of a peak growth at Adventure HQ, which is a Sharaf retail brand into outdoor and adventure space. And suddenly COVID came and we realized that while the market was growing and there was massive demand for fitness, outdoor sports, adventure, with
Mhm.
our stores closed, we were not in a position to fulfill our promises. So overnight, we built a digital platform and started supplying products to the customers. And then we realized this is a space that works fantastically with the consumer seamlessly moving from the online space and engaging with us in the offline for an experience of knowing, touching, feeling, and getting a know a bike, and then going back and getting his configurations right and ordering it in the online or coming into the online space, getting a feel of the kayak and then getting it delivered to his doorstep. The same is in case of his
Hmm.
camping gear. The same was in case of his outdoor and hiking gear. And we realized the interplay of choosing a product, learning a product, knowing a product in the online space, and then visiting the stores to validate the sizes, the fixes, the colors, or the choices enabled him to make a perfect choice. And then we went one step forward and we said,
Hmm.
hey, you don't come to me. I am happy to come to you. You are a part of my select premier customer group. I'm happy to get my products to your doorstep basis what you select, what you choose. I'll make sure that it's available to you at your doorstep, which means if you want a bike, let's say a BMC Team Machine or a BMC Alpine Challenge, you don't know what size will fit you. I'm happy to
Sure.
send three bikes, size 54, size
Wow.
57, size 59. You make a quick decision on which one works for you. You get it fitted at your doorstep for yourself, and that will help you much faster to change and get your purchases done. The same was in case of kayaks. We used to get a lot of business from Jumeirah and the Palm, where consumers wanted to buy a lot of kayaks because they had nothing else to do. We were in a position where we had to ship almost 2 to 3 kayaks on a daily basis, get to the consumer's house, get it custom fitted according to his requirement, layer it with accessories. And that's where we
Of
learned that
course.
this entire omni-channel, omni-ecosystem works seamlessly for customers. It's not about these being two different channels any longer. It's about how do they complement each other. Where does the customer drop one and pick up one? And we need to be ready to show him the ease by combining both of them. And that's exactly what we do even now at some of our businesses, where customers have to engage on, let's say, a gaming console like a PlayStation or a 95-inch Bravia TV. Now, he knows a 95-inch Bravia TV is going to cost him X. So he initially makes a purchase decision basis his consideration and awareness. But then he wants to get an experience of a Bravia demo zone where he sees that a Bravia with a quad core music system gives him a particular experience in a, let's say, a Majlis or a TV viewing den. He goes to the nearest Sony World store, tries that product, and then once he seals the deal, he gets it delivered to his doorstep.
Of
So the
course.
combination of all of it works seamlessly for a customer. And again, it's a ever changing journey. When you get into
Hmm.
services and when you layer some of these product purchases with services like installation, delivery, extended warranty, or or an annual maintenance contract for that nature, or you bring in trade-ins, you bring in repairs, then you realize it's no longer omni-channel is about online and the store. It is about online and the customer's premises. So the premise keeps changing, whether it's my store or the customer's premises. It is the
Hmm.
combination of all environments that work together. My store, my online presence, and customers' premises. I leave the choice to the customer. I make myself fungible enough to adjust in his environment as per his requisition. Basically, I need to be a quiet, silent salesman standing by him, be ready to serve him as and when he requires, whether in the online or the offline space. And I need to be the same salesman who understands what was he doing online and then support him offline, or understand what was he doing offline and then pick up the journey from there into his online space and continue the purchase.
It sounds pretty fascinating. It's almost like a white glove treatment, one would imagine, being engaging with a brand, because the experience, if it's so seamless, it can become a very attractive proposition to stick with that brand as well. But to orchestrate all of this, Karthik, is not so simple as I would imagine, because it's not something we see every brand doing consistently across the board. So I'm curious, what are the major underlying blocks you've been able to put together which help you make all of this stuff happen? Uh, just in terms of, let's just say, a store walk-in does not typically get captured. You only get to a retail phone number when the person is making a transaction. Are you able to orchestrate a moment wherein the user feels sees value in sharing his phone number even when he's walking in, or an identifier for you to know who is he and what his online history is?
We operate in a geography where personal data, consumer preferences, consumer choices are very, very discrete, and they are behind a wheel of privacy, and you need to respect
Sure,
the wheel of privacy. So you need
absolutely.
to be as unobtrusive as you can, and which is why a silent spectator or a warm and supporting relationship is what is enabled. I would never
Hmm.
go out and tell somebody that I'm in the business of selling something.
Sure,
I would go out and say I'm in the business of enabling you buy. I would, and
absolutely.
that's the distance that we need to maintain from a shopper, because that's the nature of the
Hmm.
shopper that we deal with. But uh, capturing data, capturing consumer insights, capturing his engagement pivots on the online and the offline continues to
Hmm.
be a little bit of a challenge. In UAE, it's that much more easier. In KSA,
Hmm.
we have PDPL regulations which restrict you from getting beyond a particular point. But then there are multiple routes by clubbing the online and the offline space where you can
Right.
connect the two journeys through
Hmm.
combinations of vouchers, combination of value-added
Hmm.
services,
Hmm.
combination of incentives that enable a customer, referral programs, journey truncation, lead gen campaigns, etc., which allow you
Sure.
to combine the journey between the offline and the online space. But is it easy?
Sure.
No, it is not easy. It becomes easy when the customer has manifested his intent to engage with you. When he's in the
Yeah.
discovery stage, both online and offline,
Hmm.
his privacy is still guarded. But when he manifests his intent, which is either the first click or the first touch of the product on the floor, then it gets that much more closer to he gets that much more closer to the brand and is willing to engage and share his existences.
So, as a marketing professional who believes substantially in personalization, my typical thought is if I had a butler who knew exactly what my preferences are, vis-a-vis dealing with a new cook every day that I have to tell everything from scratch, I prefer a butler. Of course, it comes with some risk of him knowing more about me than I probably would want a cook to know. But that just makes life simple as well for me. So for me, as a advocate of personalization, I see it as an enabler more than a intrusion into my life. So I would imagine there'll be a lot of merit in on-ground execution if the consumer sees the incremental value of what he's going to benefit by parting with his information. Then there is merit in him, choosing to go that route where he's getting something out of it. Now, what then becomes intriguing is in the offline ecosystem, you're dealing with a few dozen stores, perhaps even more, and there is a whole bunch of this front-end staff that has to actually orchestrate this experience. How does that play out?
If we were to go back to and this is probably outcome of the digital personalization space, retail sales is no longer a selling pitch or a sales initiative. It has already moved on to what we call a solution selling, which means when
Sure.
a customer is used to the idea of a Talabat or a Zomato, allowing him to make his own meal and allowing him to pick up his own product and make an entire ensemble out of it, which means he has an immediate option of adding socks and adding ties and adding fragrances and adding XYZ. The same now needs to be manifested on the shop floor. Otherwise, the consumer gets into the space of buying remorse. For example, when somebody walks into the floor to buy a bike, uh, he might have come with an intent to get into a bike. Now, whether he is a casual biker, a professional biker, or an amateur biker, is something that the store associate needs to gauge. So he gets into a probing, a solution selling approach, and then he layers it by adding accessories. He layers it by building a biking solution or a, let's say, a Ironman solution, or he gets into a triathlon solution or a marathon solution, depending on what the customer's space of mind is. It is an outcome of what the online user journeys have been and how
Hmm.
online user journeys have evolved. And that makes offline selling that much more challenging, that much more force multiplier. So what used to be typically a team of 25, 30 people standing at the shop floor waiting for a customer has now moved into a force multiplier where there's a product group lead who is supported by a couple of associates who try and build an assortment or a bundle for a customer while a customer sits in a concierge area and chooses to look at products on a tab and decides, oh, I want this bike, I want this helmet, I want this pump, I want this gear, I want this watch to go with it. And the same is what is happening now in the fashion space. In the fashion space,
Hmm.
when you move into a premium fashion slash marquee fashion or a masstige fashion space, consumers are no longer trying to look at. It's again an outcome of what the lookbook has done on the online space. They are no
Sure.
longer trying to buy a top and a bottom. They're trying to buy a look. So the
Yeah.
entire adjacency planning, the entire fixture planning, the entire category mix, top to bottom ratios, combinations of product and services together have started seeing a lot of relevance. If this is something we learned at Forever 21, when the consumer moved
Hmm.
from being a teenage shopper who's out to buy a top or a skirt, is now trying to buy a weekend look, a office look, a college look, a party look, an evening look, depending on what his or her requirements are, average ticket value increases. But then it puts that
Of
much more
course.
pressure on your product, that much more pressure on your inventory, that much more pressure on your buying decisions, and that much more pressure on the finesse of your sales staff. Your store staff has to move from being a seller to an advisor. And that transition is a mindset shift which requires a lot of training, a lot of enablement, and a lot
Yeah.
of refinement of personality slash characters. It is a
Hmm.
slow journey, but when it is coupled with digital devices like a tab or with digital screens or interactive kiosks in the store, it makes that journey that much more faster. Businesses like Argos,
Absolutely.
businesses like Best Buy, businesses like Sixth Street have been able to do this seamlessly by creating phygital stores where the
Hmm.
customer sees his convenient digital screen along with the product on the floor and is able to utilize it as per his convenience rather than depend on the store staff.
So, in some sense, as a premium online shopper, so to speak, with your brand, if I could request a concierge experience offline, then I'm pretty much announcing myself when I'm offline, which means as a person who's supposed to be my concierge, he will have access to whatever information he needs to have access to. And he can curate my experience in terms of the solutioning and the enablement, as you're suggesting. Is that, let's say, a playbook that you see evolving across some of these brands that have done it well?
It's already started. That journey has already started. There are a couple
Hmm.
of brands with their flagship stores in Dubai Mall where you have an option of going to the site, book a sales associate's time by paying
Hmm.
150 riyals, 150 dirhams as a deposit. You go there,
Fair enough.
finish the transaction, the person would spend an hour with you. If you finish the transaction, you buy above a particular amount, that concert service
That
is
150
free.
comes back.
Otherwise, they charge that
Yeah.
150. But what they do is, in that 1 hour that they spend with you, they enable you with all the choices, all the options, and all the experiences, which combines interactive kiosk, a physical product, a service delivery, and the knowledge about all of it put together, plus getting it delivered to your doorstep. So it takes away the entire convenience dilemma that a customer has with a comfort of a particular associate being with you for the entire 1.5 hours. So it optimizes your time. It is something that has already started happening. Stores that do not do this have started getting into cashless checkouts or a self checkout, have started getting into digital screens for fashion, have started getting
Hmm.
into interactive screens for makeups and cosmetics, have started getting into sensors for fragrances to get an idea of what fragrances would work with you, would have gotten into automatic fitness slash health devices. And in the electronic space, the demo zones, which is the DIY demo zones, all of them are a manifestation of me building my personalized shopping experience on my own inside the store without waiting for anybody else to help me.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's already started happening. Uh, I would say for a select few, it is a easy transition, but for a lot of customers, it's an adoption challenge which they might have to overcome. But eventually, that is the way the industry is going to move. So yeah,
So, in some sense, for a bunch of premium categories, these assisted mechanisms, which are human led, so the guy on the floor is not selling but solutioning, seems to be the path forward. And a similar kind of journey by an online ecosystem, now that there's a fair bit of transactions which are happening purely online as well. I'm curious about, let's say, across the value of product, where people are very comfortable doing only online, and there is, of course, these large value transactions which are discovered online first and then consumed offline and then delivered again via an online kind of an order mechanism. So, in terms of the spectrum of product categories that you deal with currently in the organization at Modern, I'm curious if you've seen the interplay across categories play out differently. That, okay, the same consumer, since you want to talk about lifetime value, he's coming in physically for this, but then he buys three things online as well. And we're able to look at this entire journey in somewhat of a seamless fashion and orchestrate the next ideal step for us.
100%, 100%. I mean, look, let's look at a electronics consumer, or let's look at a home appliances consumer. I would go to a extra or a Sharaf DG with an intent to buy a TV set, that I want to buy a 95-inch TV. But when I'm in my middle of my research process, or when I'm in the middle of my discovery process, I would just about realize that, hey, along with this, I need to get my soundbar, because the soundbar A comes at a deal. More importantly, the soundbar is co-bundled with it. On my way out, I realized that, hey, 95-inch TV would require, if I need to get my distances right, it would require a 18-inch wall bracket, which needs to be bought separately to fix my TV. It would require, I have 4 devices at home. It would require an HDMI and it would require a Fire Stick to enable all my devices on it. Now, this is a combination of my online and offline. I came into the store to buy this, but when I started my discovery process, I realized there are so many things that can go alongside it. The classical journey is the case of buying a vacuum cleaner. Everybody who's been in the business of buying a vacuum cleaner historically had been selling only vacuum cleaners. Nobody realized till the time Hoover and Bissell came into the market with an idea that, hey, when you buy a vacuum cleaner, I'm going to give you a set of 6 or 12 gauges which go alongside it. Or when somebody started selling that with a washing machine, I'm going to bundle 12 months of washing supplies and cleaning supplies that go alongside it.
Hmm.
It's when you realize that subscription commerce, what used to be a thought in the online space, became an enabler or became a automated element in the offline space. Whether it begins online or whether it begins offline is a question that I would leave it to the consumer, whether it comes out of his choice or whether it comes out of a forced communication that lands onto him. Whether it is out of his requirement or whether it's out of a bundled deal, it's too early in the game for anybody to say because there are very few
Sure.
use cases around it. But
Hmm.
going by what a Carrefour does of creating a 499 dirham weekly grocery bundle, I think the
Right.
industry is, and maybe the consumer space is already started moving into that because the cost of servicing that customer is significantly high. So if the customer purchase value falls below a particular level, while he might want all of that services, he would never be profitable for me. So I need to make
Hmm.
sure that if he wants to wants to avail all these services which he wants to, I need to have X number of customers who would upgrade from a particular level to a next level, whether it's by force, whether it's by what I call as the fear of missing out impact, or by a deal seeker impact. I need to have X number of customers move. So it's in there, it's happening. The outcome of it, I would wait for more time to see because it would not be fair if I were to judge it at this. It's too early in the game.
So what's fascinating is in terms of the way you said this whole customer segments also vary, and you have to solve for longevity because acquisition remains expensive. So first time, second time might not be enough for as a business you to become profitable. And you're operating in a somewhat competitive space. It's a relatively small population, of course, with a fair bit of spending appetite, but still a finite number of people you're dealing with. So, given that's a space from your retention strategies and your ways to, let's say, expand lifetime value, what are the top few initiatives that you think are currently the most important to-dos in your ecosystem?
That's interesting. If I was a Noon or if I was a Kareem, I would have an advantage of a customer willing to come back to me because a brand like Noon typically gets the same customer like me shop with them 3 times a week. But the space that I operate in, the electronic space, you once buy a
Right.
television, you're not going to come
Hmm.
back to buy a television for 2 to 3 years. So the
Sure.
only way that I hold the customer back is by continuous cross sell, upsell opportunities, layering my product with services. So I have an extended warranty, I have an insurance, I have an annual maintenance contract, I have my bundles that go alongside with it. And then
Hmm.
if you bought a television, and if you bought a 95-inch television, then the next time when I have a new washing machine, a new refrigerator, or a new PlayStation, or a new gaming console, or a new home theater system that comes into the fold, I would at least make an effort to reach out to you. So along with the cross sell upsell, good loyalty, which is now moved away from discounting the customer to expanding the customer. No longer it's about
Right.
giving you reward points and making you happy. It's about now trying to see at various stages of your journey, how am I able to add more value? What Apparel Group's loyalty program is, it's about unlocking value as you move
Hmm.
forward. Or what Emirates loyalty program is about unlocking value as you move through the tiers, not just depending on points, is what we as well follow at Modern Electronics Visalia, which is about moving customers from a particular bracket to B by adding complementary products, complementary services, and engagement driven rewarding to make sure that the customer sees a reason to continue with me throughout and build that learning relationship, which is very difficult for him to replicate. The butler example that you
Hmm.
said, very difficult for him to replicate. But the caveat to this is the market is changing too quickly. We are,
Hmm.
by the time I would have mastered something else, somebody would have come back with something so different that I would need to be in that space. So staying ahead of the curve in terms of all the elements is important.
Hmm.
Are we there yet? I would say we are not. We might be a couple of layers behind, but I think we're trying to catch up.
No, but you're saying a couple of layers behind your own, perhaps milestones which are fairly ambitious. I'm wondering, in the space of the competitive ecosystem you play in, people are at different stages of their evolution. And now this boils down to how agile you can be with some of these changes. And these are changes which will sometimes not be weeks, sometimes not be months, but quarters, but perhaps sometimes years, right? So when you look at that kind of change happening, how do you calibrate your own progress in terms of, okay, this is a fair enough pace at which I can move, because it's also a huge organization, right? So in terms of the way things can be done, decisions can be taken, changes can be made, failures can also be digested, can be pretty complex. So I'm curious, how do you navigate this agility while trying to make sure you're delivering to the outcomes that are needed today?
I would try and give you an example from our real life business without
That would be the
maybe
best.
giving you a lot of confidential information. We were facing a particular challenge of a particular type from a competitor about certain
Mm-hmm.
pricing requirements, and there was no other option available but to follow the suit and build that same capabilities in the business. We started building that capability in the business, but by that time the relative utility of that capability lost its edge and the market moved on to something completely different in the competition space in a value added product requirement slash community engagement. So we realized that whatever capabilities, competencies, skill sets they were building were of little significance, and we needed to stay ahead and build something different, which is where we moved from following the market into trying and leading the market into services. So we started building a differentiated pivot around services, around warranty, around insurance,
Hmm.
etc. So now we realize certain segments of the market are following up with us. So it's a hit and run at times, but more
Sure.
importantly, if you are long enough in the business, if you are able to understand customer expectations, customer pain points, customer drivers, and his ability to, or his latent demand, as which is what the old school marketers would say, latent demand
Sure.
is still very difficult to gauge. You would be at least
Hmm.
able to plan yourself and have an A and B in place that allows you to move seamlessly. But having an A and B, which used to be a choice in the past, today is no longer a choice. It's a mandate.
Hmm.
You need to have at least a A, B, and a C plan ready to make sure that you can trigger any one of them as and when required.
So, in terms of the readiness to be having a plan A, plan B, and potentially a C, there is work that you need to do from in-house team lens, and there is work from a technology infrastructure lens, from a data infrastructure lens, and from a, let's say, partner infrastructure lens. What's been your general approach on how do you build your ecosystem to move the way you want to move? What has to happen in-house? What kind of capabilities are must?
Planning happens in house. Certain execution matrices and certain execution levers are built outside the business, and certain elements are bought from the market. So it's a combination of build, buy, and make, build, buy, and plan. And
Are you able to double click a little bit on which would be where?
uh, it would get into a slightly more confidential space, but let's say if I were to get into my very simple reward slash engagement program, the entire lever around engagement program, which would be two levers, three levers, four levers, are conceptualized and built. Certain
Sure.
solutions I would buy from outside, and I
Hmm.
would
Hmm.
look at a partner to enable me in the shortest possible time that I would look at. If I were to get into the personalization space, the nuances of personalization is something I would drive inside. I would get an engine from outside. I would have a partner build it or manage it.
So the intellectual part of the whole story ideally remains in-house is where you're headed with this, it,
At
right?
the
If I were
moment,
to
yes.
articulate.
Also because are still in the we are still in the product space. We have not gone completely
Hmm.
away from the product space into the experience space. When the product
Hmm.
space has become commoditized enough, and I am completely into experience space, then I would look at leveraging somebody's experiential capabilities and bring them as a
Sure.
knowledge partner for me. At the moment, I'm still driving my product as a core and building
Yeah,
everything around it. So we know our product more than a lot of other partners, and hence we depend on the
absolutely.
partners for their capabilities surrounding enhancing the product journey, product based journeys, or product based thought ecosystems.
Fair enough. So, just getting straight into the whole subject of user engagement led retention outcomes, all of the data that you have from transactions, all of the data that you have from other ancillaries being bought, maybe sometimes people buy a TV from somewhere else, but they might buy a warranty from you or a service package from you. They're all coming in as ultimately first party data into your ecosystem. There is unification, then there is activation, then there is engagement, and there are retention outcomes. So help us understand a bit of this journey from, let's say, somebody bought a new television, a Bravia from you online, or let's say checked it out online, came to the store, experienced it, had it delivered. As a user in modern, what would my journey look like in the next 3 months? What would you do with me?
We have certain predictive logics inbuilt,
Mm-hmm.
which, depending on what stage of the journey the customer engages with us, or what product does the customer engages with us, and his broad association, still compliant to the PDPL, still compliant to the banking regulations, allows us to understand in the product purchase journey where does the consumer sit and what are
Hmm.
his next steps and next triggers that we need to work on. Basis that, product trigger, service trigger, experience trigger over a 3 to 6 week period is provided to him through
Hmm.
multiple combinations of media.
Sure.
Basis this stimuli, and it's a sequential stimuli. At every level, the stimuli changes, the expected impact changes, the expected outcome changes. Depending on the
Sure.
outcomes that you've seen, the stimuli continues to evolve up to a period
Hmm.
of 4 to 6 weeks. At the end of 6 weeks, we are able to classify this customer as somebody who is going to work with us, somebody that is potential enough for us to make an effort, or somebody who we need to leave him for the X period of time and then come back or revisit him in a particular period, or this guy is already out of my ecosystem. So that works on a couple of data platforms that we have, which are
Hmm.
inbuilt plus
Yes.
partnered with some of our
Hmm.
data partners. But more importantly, it's about 2.5 to 3 million customer purchase engagements that we have in
Yeah.
within our business, which allows us to model it. Plus 500,000 visitors slash more than 500,000 visitors a month that come onto
Hmm.
my platform that allow me to build this logic. So between the 6 7 million visitors on the platform and 2.5 million purchase transactions that we have with us, they're able to draw closer to real corollaries about where customers would move, what are the possible outcomes, track those outcomes, and then layer them with possible opportunities for us, whether we would want to, or servicing this opportunity is going to be extremely expensive. There are a lot of opportunities
Hmm.
where we let go, where we realize between the price, the quality, and the service, and the effort of servicing that requirement is going to be so high that at the end, neither of the sides are going to benefit out of it. We park those opportunities for the time being and focus on low hanging fruits. And there are enough low hanging fruits for us in the customer
Hmm.
life cycle at the moment that we should be able to drive some significant growth. We've started the journey some time ago. We have seen 17 to 18% growth through one of our partners.
Hmm.
We still have a lot of opportunity on the table which we have not leveraged. But yeah, let's see how it shapes up.
Absolutely, fair enough. So, in some sense, you're not chasing the growth at all cost model because, of course, it's a long-term, well-built business. You don't want to mess long-term goals for short-term outcomes, and that's a conscious choice you're making across some of these relatively lower-hanging fruits compared to stuff which would be expensive to service. And is that the
So
underlying principle, in some sense, the whole sustainability of this whole effort?
sustainability plus, more importantly, the nature of customer we are dealing with. When you deal with a brand loyalist for a brand like Sony, or you deal with a gamer who's engaged in the PlayStation ecosystem, or you're dealing with a loyalist for a brand like Hitachi, you would want to work on a long-term value creation rather than
Hmm.
short-term transactional value. Because Sony, as a brand, has built loyalists over generations, so you wouldn't want
Sure.
to get into short-term gain slash short-term engagement. It's
Hmm.
also about choosing basis capacity available, basis bandwidth available, basis your infrastructure available. And
Outcomes desired as well somewhere. I mean, you're already getting so much growth with this contained approach in some sense. You don't need to go crazy beyond.
I wouldn't want to unleash, or I wouldn't want to enable all my ecosystems and elements at the same time. I would rather
Sure.
wait and watch, get certain amount of fatigue in something else, give it a pause, and then come back to. There are so many other
Hmm.
levers that we have to play. that I wouldn't want to exhaust any one lever at the
So in some sense, it's a carefully orchestrated kind of execution. You don't, spray and pray. You don't blast and then hope for something to happen. It's a careful
I
orchestration.
I would be unfair and I would not be true if I were to say it's carefully orchestrated. Sometimes it is out of no options available. You just end up doing what you're doing because you wouldn't be able to manage so many things at a time. But
Sure.
ultimately, it ends up becoming it comes out as a carefully orchestrated environment, but it's not planned in that manner. Sometimes some of it
Not
is planned,
always, of
some of
course.
it just happens.
Hmm. So very interesting. Generally the lens of customer experience touch points becoming a large determinant of the long-term relationship. And you spoke about the fact that you've launched services as a line item and warranties as a line item. Does that very clearly indicate the longevity of relationship of, let's say, the service side has a great NPS, and now I'm slightly more inclined to continue the relationship with the same brand, vis-a-vis the other way around, because the whole nature of competition, you are pretty much on your toes as a brand throughout the entire customer life cycle, right? If the 95-inch TV has been bought, probably in 3 years there'll be a replenishment slash replacement slash upgrade that will happen. Now, in order for that to be in your favor, the service of the AMC experience has to be also a smooth one. And the data from that system has to come back together. The stakeholders have to be aligned. How does that part of the experience interact with your digital consumer, touch points?
The industry that we operate in, whether it is the fashion that I was operating in the past, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
the electronics industry that I'm currently in, the product is more or less commoditized. Whether I sell the Sony TV or Extra sells the Sony TV or
Sure.
Karak BG sells the Sony TV, it's the same Sony 95-inch Bravia. The reason
Absolutely.
why a customer has to come to me has to be either service led or a value add led or something else. The industry's already moved to the services ecosystem. So for
Sure.
me, it is no longer it's a norm in the business. And if I don't have it, the customer is not going to come to me. He is not going to come to me if I don't deliver the product to him the next day. I don't install it free of cost and I don't give him an extended warranty. So yes, it becomes a trigger, but it also opens up and it gives us an insight into the customer's environment. It gives us an opportunity of engaging with that customer at his residence and create an opportunity for me to cross sell and upsell a lot of other products. Because today, when I get into a horizontal, till now we were a vertical in the Sony and consumer audio video space. Now we are a horizontal, which means we've got multiple brands, multiple product categories. So when I find my entry into a customer's house through one product with one service as a support ecosystem, I have an opportunity to get all my products from my small domestic appliances to home appliances to smart home solutions to gaming solutions to computing solutions. All of it, I have an opportunity to engage and stay connected with the customer. So service, which typically used to be an experiential element, now becomes a hook for me to continue to engage and cross sell and upsell with them. And hence, the service delivery becomes that much more important and that much it becomes that much more important for me to make
It's that
sure
critical.
that if I get this wrong, I would not have any other businesses with him. So I need to make sure that I am on my toes and I'm delivering an exemplary service experience every time, whether the guy reaching on time, whether the guy installing it and cleaning it, and consumers take a due note of it, that your guy did not clean the house after installing while somebody else puts a plastic wrapper on the table, fixes my TV, and then cleans the plastic wrapper and goes. Your guy was smelling. Your guy did not come on time. He did not wear the
Right.
uniform. Oh, he came in a tool bag which was very shabby, while your boy had a tool bag which was very well built. So these are observations that come in from customers. So what used to be a typical delivery of a TV, saying, here is your carton, is no longer. It's about now opening the carton, showing the consumer, and trust me, the questions that consumers ask are unbelievable. Can you please fix the YouTube on this? Can you enter my Netflix ID and password here? Can you help me change this? Can you fix my speakers with
Sure.
this? You need to be ready to service the customer, and hence our belief that a courier boy or a laborer will go and deliver the product to the customer is no longer true. The
It's
guy
no
who
longer
goes
valid.
there should be able to speak the consumer language, which means Arabic. He should be able to understand what are the various things that can happen with the product and help the customer in configuring and enabling the product as per his or her requirement, and has to be still be polished, sophisticated. and in line, which means your cost of servicing the customer has already gone beyond the expected profitability norm. People in the industry think that services are a 75, 80%, 90% margin business, while with the kind of investments and the time per consumer that you take, it has already
Hmm.
gone down significantly. And hence, you need to layer the services with further cross sell opportunities. Then only does this
Yeah.
entire engagement become profitable. Otherwise, it's just a feel good. You left a happy customer, and that's about it.
Yeah, fair enough. So, in some sense, the whole observation about what's happening in the third premise you spoke about, your premise, your online platform, and the customer's home, is where all of these discoveries would have emerged. That when a delivery guy goes to deliver a TV, now he's asked all these questions. It must have struck somebody at some point, कि, okay, he needs to be better prepared to answer this. And then this is not the guy anymore. You can't have a courier boy perhaps get into the Netflix password, YouTube configuration, ISP configuration kind of topics. You suddenly had to retrain everybody to be able to elevate that experience.
A yes and a no. So all of it isn't planned. It's purely from the changing experiences and changing
Hmm.
expectations of the customer. And you might have an option of replanning or retraining your team, but then there is also an option of make versus buy. There are aggregators and consolidators that
Okay.
provide some of these services in the market if the market
Hmm.
is mature and evolved enough. And depending on the thresholds, geographies, and volumes, you build your own
Right.
capabilities. Now, how much do we leverage both is something at this point I would not be in a position to divulge, but it's a
That's
combination of
okay.
both. But
Yeah. Yeah.
overall, the industry needs to evolve and industries evolved significantly. What used to be a Indian postal services many years ago in India, by 2010,
Right.
11, when I set up my own startup, had moved to a Blue
Hmm.
Dart and then went to a delivery and then went to a Zomato and then went to a Swiggy. The way the delivery, the last mile ecosystem has evolved in India, the ecosystem is evolving much faster globally.
To what extent have you been able to find on your own, let's say, journey of the nirvana stage of data unification? What are the key things that are now unified for you?
So my stores and my online networks are now linked.
Hmm.
So I'm able to have a one view of my customer. I'm able
Okay.
to link his purchases. I'm trying now to see if there is a way I can link his actions on different channels or different platforms. Today we operate on three online and one offline platform. I still
Right.
haven't been able to club all of them together, but I've reasonably clubbed them. I
Hmm.
have been able to get his entire purchase behavior, his engagement behavior, not been able to club the social behavior. But now I'm trying to see how do I leverage that to A, surprise him at both the ends, and B, give him a lot more personalized options which are more relevant to him?
Hmm.
Because an emailer that goes on a weekly basis to him might not be something that he would be looking at. But if I'm able to dovetail
Yeah.
basis his last purchase or his last dissatisfaction or his last abandoned journey, which we're able
Right.
to do to some extent, my chances of conversions would be good. My abandoned conversions have gone from 0% to around 12%, but I'm still significantly behind in that
Of
journey.
course. A lot of evolution continuously, right? So that's the kind of stuff we keep seeing with a lot of our customers where the first lift happens and then some stuff slows down and then another lift happens. So you keep raising the bar with all the incremental data points and the incremental components that come in. Karthik, AI has been a buzzword. I keep wondering as to have somebody been able to get a real outcome driven application of this. Is there something you're experimenting with right now which is meaningful and it seems like a good promise?
I would hold the answer to this. I
No
would hold the
worries.
answer back, but there is some work happening on this. We
Mhm.
might be out with some new releases by November, December. We are replatforming and we are migrating onto a completely new digital ecosystem by December,
Okay,
January.
fair
So
enough.
it's a completely new architecture, new system, new technology, and
Hmm,
new interface, which would be enabled and powered by a lot of what you just asked for. So I'm going to
fair enough.
hold the answer
So
to
you're
that.
doubling down on AI at a macro level. Of course, the specifics we'll discover when it's out there. Tell me
Then trying to
something,
leverage AI at multiple stages
for sure.
in the
Hmm.
online and offline journey, but I would pause at
Mhm.
that.
Fair enough. Understood. So, the simple, you talk about replatforming and a whole bunch of investments from a technology lens, and these are sometimes decisions that need a certain amount of executive conviction. Is this coming from the fact that this is a definite, clear, understood table stakes? Or is there, let's say, the whole ROI question still needing to be justified at various levels?
There is a third angle to this, and it
Mm-hmm.
is legacy improvisation. We've been on a legacy platform, and there's only so much that we can do, and there's only so much that I can build onto. And hence, there is
Sure.
a necessity for me to move from my
Hmm.
legacy onto a slightly more free spirited environment, which allows me to expand and build capabilities in multiple dimensions, whether it's my product capability, platform capability, fulfillment, last mile, whether it's a
Hmm. Hmm.
capability of integrating my online offline stores, whether it's my capability to drive experiences, whether I'm building an
Right.
intent driven journey, etc. Now, all of this requires certain amount of repivoting, and that's what we are doing. I wouldn't say we are doing it out of a industry force. It's purely because there is only so much that the current technology and current system can do. And to bridge the gap from where we are to where we need to be, this becomes an
Right.
enabler. This doesn't become a driver. It only becomes an
Sure.
enabler. Drivers of
Of
the
course.
business would still be the fundamentals that we are building onto. But with
Yeah.
this, the force multiplier impact starts coming in. I would be able to do it faster and I would be able to do it at a lower cost.
Fair enough. So, in some sense, there's been underlying infrastructures that have been built over a period of time, and now there is a certain need to step change what you're able to do with it because there's so much more that's possible, and that's what you're very clear about investing forward in. Super cool. Thanks so much, Karthik, for this conversation. Very useful for me to understand the ecosystem you operate in and how the pieces are coming together from the experience side of things, the service side of things, from the product being commoditized side of things, and what that means from a competition and loyalty perspective. Any closing remarks?
No, I think thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and yep, I think it was an interesting discussion, and thank you so much.